Welcome back, rugby fans, to, of course, the Rugby Debate Show, where we put ourselves and our guests to the test here on the Rugby Rant podcast show. My name is Ty Braga, your host for today's activities, alongside the familiar faces of Scott, the big guy Ferrara. However, this occasion, we have somebody else here joining us. This makes two teams, or a two-man team for the Hammers. Rob Hammerschmidt and Preston join us in the top right-hand corner, battling it against Scott Ferrara. An interesting one. We've never had this dynamic before, gentlemen, have we?
Hopefully never again.
Hopefully never again. So, in all honesty,
he doesn't like hanging with his old man. He's a little,
that's not true.
Embarrassed.
I'm a little worried that you and I are going to get a fight, and no one's going to have this, like, the ability to turn this camera around and record that.
Hit him with the chair.
Luckily enough, we encourage fighting on the show. So it works perfectly. But more so to the point, I wanted to take an opportunity to be able to remind our viewers what we do here on the Rugby Rant is to be able to put our guests against each other to be able to debate the topic at hand. They are each given the opportunity to rant with 2 minutes to play. They will talk about the topic, the good, the bad, the ugly, what they like, what they don't like. And this week we are talking about the Major League Rugby title. Of course, we have our new crowned champions, the LA Giltinis, an expansion team, a new champion for the first time. Lots to unpack about this championship final that was taking place this past Sunday, August 1st, at the LA Coliseum. So once again, we take the opportunity to be able to remind our viewers that each one of our ranters will be talking about the MLR Championship final that took place in LA. The final scoreline, surprising to some and to many, it was just a predictable outcome, they say. We're going to find out what our team here thinks, and we're going to start off with Scott Ferrara. The floor is yours.
Let's get hot. And let me just say there's going to be a little thing at the end I'm going to talk about, so hopefully Ty will give me a little bit of extended 2 minutes because it's important what I want to say at the end. And Rob's already rolling his eyes, but let's talk about a successful MLR final. First of all, 7,500 fans, Steve Aoki getting the crowd geared up pre-match, LA Coliseum, and honestly, besides the fact that there was great rugby being played, it looked professional. Not only was it a win for the LA Giltinis, I feel it was a win for the MLR. I mean, a lot of people had talked about the broadcast value and production they got through the CBS production they had, in this particular game. And I gotta say, I think you would see how it progressed through all the games on TRN and your local affiliates since match one, where you had guys who didn't know anything about rugby trying to do this job, and now they're in week 20 or whatever it is. So anyway, let's talk about a match. And I think I said it before, and Ty yelled at me because I was giving away content for free on the MLR Fan Zone. But ATL got out ATL'd by the LA Giltinis. The LA Giltinis in the prior matches did not have the best set pieces, although on the defensive lineouts they were disrupting a lot of the teams on that side, but they were also getting disrupted, and they kind of really held it down on their own lineouts, rolling mauls. They really put the pressure on ATL, and if you watch the ATL Rooney match, you saw that ATL's best asset that they had was running up on defense and hitting that gain line at full speed to disrupt what Rooney was trying to do in the back line. That's exactly what LA did to them. And it was interesting to see that tactic roll over and to ATL using the same tactic they used against Rooney, trying to kick for possession. And obviously it didn't work. I always feel like whether it's the ball in hand for the forwards or the ball in hand in the backs, when you want to play LA, you want to keep the possession as much as possible because they have swift counterattacks. That first try by John Ryberg was all Macatow. That second try by John Ryberg is all Macatow. Now, don't get me wrong. If Ryberg's not being disciplined and running those supporting lines, does the try get scored? Those two tries get scored? I'm not sure. Maybe they stop him because Gatow wasn't getting in there. But Gatow opening it up to then John Ryberg to come in to have an open channel. I mean, it was something that has happened all season and just happened to happen twice in the first 20 minutes of this match. ATL, on the other hand, looked very disjointed in their back line. Again, I think it was as soon as they were getting that ball, and LA was crossing the game line on the other side, they didn't know what to do because LA had gotten in their face. It's It's a tough one. It's one of those matches where I think LA ran out. I think ATL ran out of gas a little bit, playing some hard matches at the end. Playing a tough Rooney team that was really a bruiser of a match. And obviously, then going to the West Coast to go play a final is always going to be tough. In this even with this travel. But real quick, I just want to say this is my little thing. So my buddy Nish Naireth, he works for MLR. He's in operations and marketing. He put this little post out at the end of the match, and he said, "No games canceled." Let me say that again: no games canceled. Launched to the Rugby Network, so that way it's free to all viewers. Built a strong sponsorship, including American Airlines, Geico, and Guaranteed Rate. Had 8 teams competing for 4 playoff spots going into the last 3 rounds of competition. Built new fan engagement tools, the MLR app, betting partnership with Genius Sports, and the fan portal that's now part of the MLR app. If you guys haven't seen it, the MLR app has been updated with a fan portal. And launched successful grassroots development initiatives with all 12 teams competing in the league. Again, it's not only a win for the Giltinis, it's a win for the MLR. Thanks for letting me go over the time.
Hey, Ty, first of all, he may have gone over time just with his rant, but I will say I'll allow that last piece. Any potential investors looking to get into the league, I think, needs to take that little summary and break it down piece by piece, because that illustrates just how strong the league came out of COVID. So I think that was well taken. Thank you, Scott, for reminding everybody how important this season has been for the growth and development of rugby in the United States.
I couldn't agree anymore. And, the MLR final is so much more than a victory for just LA. It's a victory for the sport in North America, for the fans, and of course, as the league and everybody who's involved at all different levels of the organization and, of course, the sport. So it is worth mentioning, but let's rewind to some of those few points that Scott had brought up that is worth revisiting. One of which you said the production value, CBS. What a better home to be able to have the final broadcasting it, right? And then on top of that, what better place to have it broadcast and played than the LA Coliseum? One of the great advantages we spoke about when it was first revealed that this would be the home for LA is the broadcast quality that can come from a venue like that. And they delivered. And it was a slick, professional-looking product. And to your point there, Rob, how great is it for if you're a potential investor or a potential new fan and you tune in and you see the level of production being at that standard, and the crowd was energetic. It was great camera angles. It looked good, and it looked like a festival atmosphere. And then the rugby on the field delivered as well. And on that point, talking about Rugby ATL, who played that kicking game, possession, I think you said was the key in that regard. But you also kind of compared it to a battle that they had where it was the ground and pound against Rooney, a little bit more of a tougher physical battle. And that's what I would have expected from ATL, was to have that same physicality that we come to love from them. And it was traditionally one of their strengths that I didn't quite personally see involved in this game as much as I had seen in the past. I don't want to dive too much further into that because I'm sure I'm now going to start stepping into some of the territory that Rob and Preston might be able to have in their conversational rants. So what we're going to do here is we're going to hand it over to Preston as our guest before the big hammer takes over. So Preston, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I think Scott touched on a little bit. ATL got out ATL. In the past season, ATL has been known to kind of kick away, push the other team back in territory, and that's really what wins a lot of more international test rugby, is pushing the other team back in their own zone, and then letting that team play into a penalty or a knock-on or something of that nature. But in this game, I noticed ATL's kicking ability wasn't there. When they kicked down deep, it wasn't deep enough, and it was right down the middle channel of the field. It wasn't in the 15-meter channel where it really should be in off of 10. And the other thing I really noticed is that ATL's lineup keeps changing in the back line. And I think there's some continuity issues that really spread, and this is why ATL has been so defense-focused, is that they haven't been able to attack really well because they keep changing their fly half. I mean, and when you change a quarterback in football, your attack's not going to run all that well. It's the same thing in rugby. If you're changing your 10 every couple weeks, it's going to have the same effect. And I think then on top of that, Gitsu was putting kicks in deep that were right in that channel that ATL would grab, and they'd be either tackle right away or is right over ATL's head. And that was issues. There was one time where Ryberg knocked it on, and he mentioned it when we watched it. But after that, all the kicks ATL put in were right in the middle. Ryberg would either take it down the channel or pass it off, and transition ball is what really won the Giltinis the game. And I think really ATL shot themselves in the foot in that sense, which was really disappointing, having put ATL by about 5 on Super Brew, really hoping for something magical out of that. Right. But other than that, I think ATL really, really missed out. And I think I count at least 5 to 10 times where they went into contact the ball and they knocked it on, which is something you can't do. I mean, when you look at professional era rugby, that's something you don't do. And when you do it, it turns into a transition ball, and that's when teams score. And that's what's really happening in rugby now is transition ball is key. And we can tell Giltinis putting the foot down, making them bleed or choke out, and ATL I think definitely choked.
Right. And I think so. There's a couple of points that I wanted to dive in on there very quickly before I forget it. So the two things that I will take away from your rant there, Preston, is one, they were playing the kicking game, but they weren't doing it well. Second thing is that the physicality, as I mentioned a moment ago, that was present in all of this leading up to here wasn't quite there. And as you said, when they were going into contact, they were losing the ball. And as we all know, you got to protect the ball. And they weren't doing a great job of that because on the other hand, LA was turning over the ball fairly often in those breakdown areas, which is uncharacteristic for ATL to lose so much ball in situations they normally been dominant in. And that, again, is another point, is that there weren't enough dominant tackles. They were, being hit and going backwards, or they were being put so far back that when they did run the ball up, they had already lost about 5 to 6 meters on each play. It just wasn't crossing that game line enough, right? So really good points there. Two that I think they'll definitely stand out as something worth mentioning, and you addressed those. Rob, let's hear what you got to share.
So ATL played, in my mind, the perfect ATL game for the first 20 minutes. But what do they do best? They do best by playing from the front. So getting a couple penalties, being 3, 6, 9 ahead, and then they can afford to play a defensive structure, right? The problem is that once LA scored those 2 tries at minute 21 and minute 23, immediately ATL is on the back foot, and they don't play well from behind. They're not an offensive-oriented team. So, that idea of kicking away possession, putting teams back in their 22 and making them play out of it isn't going to work as well, because you got to have possession to score. So once LA scored those 2 tries, the script blew up. ATL had to recover, and they just don't have that explosive offense to be able to play from behind all that well. And as Preston mentioned, I noticed Ryberg knocked that first kick on in the first 20, but after that he was rock solid, and he really they were able to counterattack in it, and it didn't play to ATL's structure. ATL was killed by turnovers. We mentioned that. But they didn't also control the ruck as often as they usually do, whether it be on offense or defense. But I want to mostly focus on offense. Oftentimes, they would get into contact. There would be 2 or 3 guys right there. They would control the ruck and be able to develop another phase. They didn't do that too well. You saw LA actually poach the ball a number of times immediately, either stripping the ball from hand, or by getting them the hands on the ball immediately before the ATL support lines could be there. And I think that hurt them. I remember one run by Masagalu, stormed up. He made 25 or 30 meters, and I'm screaming, he has no support. And of course, what happens? It creates a turnover. Finally, once LA was ahead, they controlled the tempo of the game, and they used the kick to do it. Not necessarily a high ball, although that happened. They chipped ahead. That's how Ryberg scored the second try, right? It was that little chip through over top, and it was AAC that got the ball and then passed to Ryberg, who ultimately scored a second try. And they also kicked for touch a couple of times and put ATL onto defense within their 5-meter line, and that really put a lot of pressure on them and found it difficult to play out of their end.
Yeah, absolutely. So ATL, unfortunately, we've driven this point home again, but I wanted to recap so everybody who's listening and watching knows that traditionally they're great at the breakdown area. They're usually very good to be able to protect that ball as soon as the player hits the ground. And you say protecting the ball to recycle it quickly, and that just wasn't happening. And I left the player on the ground exposed for a little bit too long, and the turnovers came about. The rolling mauls, however, was a strength that worked in their favor. If we have to find some good here, traditional strength, we know that line out 5 meters out, that they're devastating, and they have been using this tool really well all season, and it worked. It's great in the case of was it 2 tries from maul situations, rolling maul situations, or at least one I can think of.
There was one early on in the first half, and I think it made the difference at half. I think the difference was 8 at that point, going into halftime.
And at that point, you felt like it was still anybody's game, right? At least by scoreline only. Now, if you had to break it down and look at who was playing the better game at that point, it was definitely going to be LA, and it had been LA pretty much right from about. Well, here's the other thing to bear in mind. And we spoke about this, I think, last week. And if it wasn't last week, it was only the week before that, but recently. And we said that the first 20 minutes are critical to the outcome for LA. And if you can stop that attack in the first 20 minutes, chances are that you felt strong that you would be able to hold them off for the rest of the game. But in contrast to what we believed and what had been evidence in the past, at 3-3, it was the score, I think, somewhere around about the first water break mark, so around about that 20 minutes. And then the points came from Ryberg a few minutes later in quick succession. So it must have taken the wind out of the sails for ATL. What do you think, Scott?
Well, I was going to say it's reminiscent. It's funny. We talk about the first 20 minutes, and do you know what match that didn't happen was the first time LA played AGs at Coda. And I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. It was early in the season. I think at halftime, LA was only winning 7-3, and the final, and the final, or it might have been 7-14 at that point, but I'm pretty sure it was 7-3 or 7-10 or 3-10. But I do remember at the end of that match, Ryberg muscles through to score the last try, and the final becomes 17-3. And that second half of that AG's LA match reminds me of pretty much the last 60 minutes of this match. It was like, ATL was holding them to a certain extent, but then they would, and then LA would break through, and ATL just couldn't do anything on offense. And that was the same thing that happened to the AGs in the game. I think that was the first time anybody held LA under, whatever it is, 38 points or whatever it was, but LA stifled them on offense, and there's so many parallels between that early match to this late match that, we talk about the first 20 minutes, but sometimes you can hold them the first 20 minutes and it still doesn't go your way.
Yeah. So, Rob, I want to throw it over to you. Who were really some of the standouts that made the biggest difference out there in the field for the MLR final?
Well, I mean, obviously, Matt Gitu wins the man of the match. He was responsible for launching Ryberg directly in that first try. And the second try, he had that, really nice kick ahead that was ultimately gobbled up by AAC, and that sprung, Ryberg to score in the corner. I thought he played well. For me, though, it was, and I'm a big Goddard fan. I just think he plays the ball so quick and so fast that it actually played to their strong suit because it minimized the speed of attack of the defensive line speed of ATL, right? Because it's hard to get set. One of the tries, Preston and I were talking about it. I think it was one of the last try it was DTH's try. We're watching the match together. We're at the Chicago Blaze. A couple guys are there. And we watched in the replay, Chance Wangalewski just come into the game, right? The ball goes out to DTH, and he actually has to fold 4 times to get around to even have an opportunity. And, of course, you got a mismatch with a prop against against a winger like DTH, but he had to fold 4 times because there was no defensive support out wide, right? And because Goddard played those phases so quickly, you found that the defensive structure broke down because you have a prop trying to, fold 4 times and try to stop DTH scoring in the corner.
Right.
And so in my mind, it was that quickness, which with Goddard played the ball, that made a huge difference and perhaps went undervalued for me.
Right. And that's kind of been the sentiment all season long. You've been singing his praises. So why would it be any different in the final, right? But another layer to that, I think, is that in this particular matchup, they were already realizing that they were under pressure at these breakdown areas and committing more bodies to them to be able to try and secure that ball, especially when you're in that red zone area on your side, right? That again, rugby is a game of mismatches. As you identified, it was a mismatch on the outside. They put DTH in the top left-hand corner, who, by the way, through the fan poll on the MLR fan zone, was ranked by the MLR fans as the second best player, in their opinion, this season. And as the Canadian international, I'm sure most people would agree that he had a wonderful season. But it really was Ryberg that got the moments of the match, courtesy of the hands of Gitto and Adam Ashley Cooper, who provided him with quality ball. Although I will add, he still had a lot of work to do, especially on that second one, to be able to cross the line. So his momentum just made him get through. He's a big boy, and when he's at full pace, he's pretty tough to be able to stop. And as Scott pointed out, he still knew to be in the right position, running the right lines, and be at the correct pace, ready for that, because that was not – you didn't feel like those were all training field set plays. That was open play rugby at its best. What do you guys think? Preston, I'll hand it over to you, actually.
Yeah, I obviously get to wins man of the match, like Dad said or Rob said, whatever you want to call him. And it was true the kicking, but it's really, I think for me, Billy Meeks, it's just push forward ball. I don't think he ever was stopped behind the game line. And he, a lot of times I noticed, would take the ball into contact, kind of be alone, hold it up for a second against often locks and big boys, and then eventually go down, recycle really quickly for Goddard to then play quick to get to, and Ryberg and such. And I think it's really a testament to, like we had talked about while watching the game, him being able to play that flanker role, but playing 12 excellently, where, Adam Ashley Cooper maybe isn't going to take as many go over hard hitting lines at that 12 position. Meeks, I think, did unbelievable job at it, and I think that's what really helped to set LA on the front foot, especially against ATL, who's been rock solid on defense. That man breaking the line is what really set up LA quite often.
And I love the analysis from all three of you, but I wanted to be able to have the fans that are watching walk away with a bigger and grander vision for where rugby is right now based on the merits of what has been achieved this season. So, Scott, what would you say are the takeaways for somebody new or somebody who's been a fan of rugby but only paying attention to North American rugby now?
I think the takeaway as let's say we'll call him a casual fan. A takeaway as a casual fan is, what's next, and what's next is the draft. And, we're having TRS is having that showcase, the rugby showcase. And that's going to be, not that it's going to be televised, but there's going to be something about it. So I think as a casual fan, what's next is getting into some of these young names and figuring out who the next set of rookies are going to be. Let's take LA, for example. Christian Rodriguez, a rookie 9. I mean, who would have thought, with all the complaining people do about LA and they don't have enough American, and North American players and all that shit, they had a rookie 9 who got significant playing time this season and even won man of the match in one of their matches.
Right. Christian Rodriguez, of course, you're talking about.
Yeah, a scrummy. And that doesn't happen often. And that does not happen abroad. And it almost doesn't happen in the MLR. And it's starting to happen now. So I think what's next is check out the MLR and see how those guys are going to translate next season, because we've seen them produce from this past draft in the 2021 season.
Right. And, talking about that, there's so many names to be paying attention to that could very well be that next generation of stars. Now, Rodriguez has already been, he was capped. Rob would know this one, wasn't he? But he was called up, right?
No.
Oh, I'm thinking like where? Sorry. I'm thinking
like Nebraska.
Nevertheless, You got Ryan James is another name I wanted to pick up who recently got some great game time, 2 tries in the semis there. You've got these guys coming up, but right now where it stands as a brand and as a product that that Major League Rugby has created, what are the values of that moving forward, Rob, for you? And what will be the strength next season of the rugby that they produce?
So I'm going to say this. First of all, I want to throw a shout out and dovetailing off what Scott said. How about Ryan Reese, right? Mm-hmm. And a product of Life University, an American-born player. Do you see that little snipe he took to get ATL in the position to score their last try? That's the potential that's out there for American players, right? And as Scott talked about, somebody coming out of the draft and really showing their wares. But I also think we've got to put the brakes on being real critical of a team like LA coming in with a lot of international stars. Think about Rydberg was a good player for Colorado, but think about how good he has been as a result of playing with international caliber players that, maybe they're over the hill, but nevertheless, think about how well he's come along. Think about how you mentioned Ryan James, how well he's come along. Think about how well some of these international, Mika Cruze, think about how well he's come along as a result of playing with some of these international players.
Are in their early 20s. There's another 10 years. 2031, if it's here on home soil for a Rugby World Cup, those guys will still be in a playing age.
Right. And so let's put this in context. I mean, the international player, yes, it might that keep somebody out of the lineup like a Christian Rodriguez on a regular basis? Yeah, but it's also going to make all of them better.
Right. And that's exactly it. All of what has been achieved this season has made rugby better in the North American landscape, without a doubt. I mean, Gary Gold echoed these very same thoughts when he spoke about choosing his players to be able to take on internationals. He had so many players he could choose from. He had access to them because the MLR is working in close partnership. And of course, he's had these players have all had more time to be able to be developed because of the MLR where it is right now. But I want to hand it over for a final thought. Your takeaways, Preston, on where Major League Rugby is now and where it could be next season.
Yeah, I'm gonna bounce off a guy over here in the tank. I think, like you said, God, like you said, I think
that's a point taken away from Rob right
seriously.
Now.
I'm really glad I'm not the only one thinking that. But I think LA really yes, there's this super team coming in with all these international caliber players, but being a college kid at Lindenwood, I feel the same things like someone like Roddy or Cardi might feel, right? I'm playing under these international players, but by playing under them, I'm getting 20 times better. So we were talking about it. Head coach of LA leaves, goes to the Rebels. I believe Goddard came from the Rebels Academy. Could we see him go back? Could we see Gitu leave? And then what does that open up? That opens up Rodriguez coming back into 9. That leaves Cardi coming into 10. And what they gain from it, and what really America gains from any international player coming over, is the experience of playing under someone, which, if you look at Sexton and then Carberry playing under Sexton over at Leinster gets maybe 10 times better, even 5 times better, but now he's stepping into that 10 role at Ireland possibly with Sexton leaving and getting older. And it's the same thing here in America. I think with guys possibly leaving Giltinis, I think you could see American-based players really grow and excel, and then who knows, 2031 or whatever the year is, USA could really pop out. So I've seen on the MLR fan zone, these international guys are in here and taking spots, but in all reality, they're making American rugby so much better. I mean, even look at Basket playing over at NOLA, and now he's Utah and USA Rugby, and Cardi under Gitu, and maybe even Rodriguez someday. So
yeah, you never know. It could be a Basca Roddy in 2031 when we host the Rugby World Cup in 2031.
Right. And we hope, but the foundation for that has been laid. And as Preston pointed out, they only have experience to be able to gain by playing with guys that are greater than them, and with that type of experience. Rob pointed out the the growth for Ryberg and how he's matured as a player, his positioning, his strength with the ball in hand, all these factors. And, he's reading the lines much better than he did when he was with Colorado. I would say that. I had the opportunity to observe. And why? To the credit of Adam Ashley Cooper, they worked really closely together, and he's been coaching him behind the scenes, as a mentor, not in a formal coaching role. And so I'm sure it's the same for many of the players. So there is great value. But of course, you as the fan can tell us what you think by dropping a comment down below. Maybe you agree with these guys on screen. Maybe you disagree with them for whatever reason it may be. We would love to be able to learn about what your thoughts are. So again, drop a comment down below. We'll get to it as quickly as we can. And for the rest of you who want to continue learning more about the Rugby Rant, what we do, you can follow us on social media at the handle at Rugby Rant Pod, where we will continue to be able to share everything we know and everything we will continue to learn about rugby in North America, because we, as the Rugby Rant, aim to grow rugby one fan at a time. Whereas we take a moment to step away from this topic for the Major League Rugby 2021 title being handed to LA in opposition against Rugby ATL, we will take a moment to learn a little bit about one of our sponsors again, who help us continue to be able to share what we do here with you as fans. So we'll be back in just a moment.
I'm ready.
Rugby Rant fans, one of our sponsors is Can-I Brands, and what we like about Can-I Brands is they have 4 lines of CBD products that can help you throughout the day, throughout the week. We talk about recovery, we talk about energy, we talk about mellowing out, we talk about helping you when you're sleeping. The best thing about Can-I Brands is they're safe alternative to opioids and other habit performing prescription drugs. They're trusted, lab tested, all natural, non-habit forming. And you know what? They have no THC in them, which is, a good thing considering, most of us like to stay employed. But I use Can-I Fresh. And what happens is, I had a long day at work. My wife is yelling at me, Mrs. the big guy is yelling at me about all the laundry I didn't do. I got Ty Braga yelling at me because I don't know. I gave away free information on the MLR Fan Zone, free content. And you know what I need to do? I just need to mellow out. I just need to take that edge off. I'm high strung sometimes. And just, 8 sprays of this Can-I Fresh, kind of mellows me out a little bit, gets me in a good mood to really do some creative things when I'm helping Rob out with edits or I'm doing the audio version of the podcast. Also, actually, I was going to roll it over to Ty, but I love the Can-I Mend Balm. I'm a big dude. You guys know I hurt my ankle like 3 or 4 weeks ago.
Still on IR.
Yeah, still on IR. Ben Foden challenged me to a 40-yard dash. I don't think it's going to happen. But the Can-I brand balm, Men Balm, was awesome. I mean, literally, it should have taken me 2 or 3 weeks to recover from that ankle sprain. It took me about a week. It eased the pain. It helped the swelling. So really, it's all 4 of these things combined can really help out your day.
Yeah, 100%. And, the one that I've enjoyed most is the Can-I Boost. So there's a couple of different ways to be able to enjoy it. This is the dropper, and 8 drops under the tongue. You're good to go. The spray is, I think, 8 pumps as well. But then there's the balm. So it's really convenient whichever way you want to be able to use it. But the Can-I Boost got a little bit of a caffeine kick to it. So it does exactly as it promises, is to give you that little bit of a boost for a few hours to get through a dull or boring task, or just maybe you need that pick-me-up. But you can go and check it out yourself and try it out for the first time, or continue to be able to enjoy it like you have been. With the promo code RANT25, you're going to get 25% off your entire order, not just one single item, but everything in that basket. So make sure you load as much as you can into that before you use that code, because you're going to get that maximum savings then. And anything over, any great, any purchase of the greater goods or everything you got in your basket, over $49 is going to give you free shipping anywhere in the continent US that they ship to. So make sure you just check that shipping policy. It's important to be able to check that they will ship to you. We want you to be able to get the good stuff that we're getting here. And you can do that by using that promo code RANT25, and that's 25% off. So again, that's canibrands.com. Thanks again for sharing those thoughts there, Scott. An extra point.
Bonus point, baby.
So, as we take the opportunity to be able to step into the latter part of our podcast here on the Rugby Rant, as you know, that rugby debate show, we put our guests against each other for top honors as they compete, giving their best views on the topic at hand. In the first part, we spoke about the Major League Rugby 2021 final going to LA, and they shared their analysis inside that, shared their thoughts on what they believe are the takeaways from that for fans that are tuning in. But we want to turn our attention to the other rugby action across in Japan with Tokyo 2020 sevens between the men's and women's results for both Rugby Canada and the US. So without further delay, let's hand it over to Rob Hammerschmidt to be able to start us off.
Well, there's a lot to cover in this one with both men's and women's from both Rugby Canada and the United States. So I'm going to try to hit the high points. I think U.S. men, people are talking about it as a disappointment, and I would argue, is it really? I mean, the U.S. certainly have the potential to do very well. Obviously, they won the Vegas tournament, but they've been pretty consistent. And if you think about the challenges when you're talking about sevens, is you have some powerhouse teams that it's pretty tough to defeat, New Zealand and Fiji, and then, of course, the now combined UK team. So I think they had a big mountain to climb. And quite frankly, without a guy like Ben Pinkelman, I think they missed him at the breakdown quite a bit because he is a breakdown specialist. I think that didn't work to their advantage. I think another thing that I began to question is the age factor. I don't mean to take away from those guys, but if you looked at collective age, you had 7 guys in the 12-man rotation that were over 30. Compare that to Fiji. Fiji only had 3 that were over 30, and they had 5 that were younger than 25. So I just begin to wonder whether maybe, yes, there's some experience there, but when you're talking about a press tournament over 2 days, playing over to the heat and conditions they were being asked to play in, did that play to their disadvantage? The women, the women's team, I think a great takeaway is they were 3-0 in pool play. I think they really played well. They were physical. They were dominant. They just ran up against a tough UK team. They lost 21-12. That was a rough one. And they split with Australia. So they went 4-2 overall. And I think it was a pretty good result. It doesn't show in the fact that they got 6th this year as opposed to in Rio where they got 5th. But I think the results were pretty good. Splitting with the former Rio 2016 champion, Australia, you got to feel good about that result in pool play. As far as Rugby Canada goes, the men, they weren't even in the tournament in 2016. Right. And so to look at what they did here, yeah, they were 5-1. That was a bit of a disappointment, but to see them, come into the tournament and actually, get 8th, they've got to start somewhere. So let's see how they develop here in 2024. And finally, Rugby Canada women, that was the big disappointment. Of the 4, that was a big disappointment. They had the bronze medalist in the Rio. And they're 9th this year with a record of 3-2. So I think women's fans of Rugby Canada got to be disappointed.
Right. And I think a lot of people would share that sentiment with you because the highest expectation would have been on the women's sevens for Canada. As you so rightly pointed out, they were a medal placing. Yeah, but for the men's side, hey, this is an upside. They weren't even qualified for the 2016, even though it's a placing of 8, you only had up to be able to go, right? I mean, you were included, you competed, and you'll take away some great lessons to be able to learn with you. But the nature of sevens is that it's unpredictable. The same reason that we say, oh, we enjoy it can't be the same reason now that we discredit a team, because every team here was in a very surreal environment when participating in rugby. They all had the same challenges with COVID. The preparations were hindered. They didn't have the same game time they were leading up to it, the unpredictability. Are those excuses? Probably not, because everybody was in the same boat, so to speak. Was there a higher expectation for USA Rugby than what maybe was realistic? These are thoughts that people are throwing out on social media. I'm not going to answer them. I'm actually going to hand it to Preston to see what he thinks.
Yeah, I think I'm going to touch on age more for me because obviously I'm the young buck and I know what's going on college-wise, as much as he likes to think he is. I think USA. I think a lot of teams have figured it out youth-wise, but USA hasn't. This is Olympics number 2. They're using the same basis of players as the last one, but I think Mike Friday and whatever the next Sevens Olympic squad is going to look like coaching-wise is going to realize there's youth to be had, and to be honest, the youth Sevens rugby is exploding. Olympics number 1, there's a lot of youth now interested in it. Olympics number 2, those kids that were young are showing up. My guy, Nick Hardrick II, coming from LU, going into his sophomore year. I think he's playing with USA U23s at almost 19 in the upcoming Rugby Town. Correct me if I'm wrong there, anybody in the comments. But a guy like him who's 19, he's been through two Olympics watching him, and now he's coming out. I think he could explode on the scene. Harley Wheeler, again, going to be young for the next Olympics. Even Cody Melfi. I think just USA is figuring out that they're going to have to wait a little bit, and I think it's going to be the third Olympics. That's really going to be the one to help them out. I think going from 6th, I think the next one should be a medal at least. Women's wise, I think they just missed it. 4-2, I think just doesn't. 6 like stinks looking at it, but 4-2 in sevens is a good go. Like, the record doesn't show the performance they went on, and sevens is a different beast. You can go undefeated in pool play and then drop 2 games, go 1-2 real quick. Rugby Canada wise, I don't know much. I know my guy, alumni of LU, Seattle Seawolf right now, Nick Taylor was a part of a 7 squad going to Italy a couple years ago. Excuse me. And he's not in it right now. I'm not sure what their academy system is looking like, but it seems like they're dropping off, because I know not too long ago Canada was in the hunt. They were like the USA. In one tournament, couple tournaments, they could be up there in the top 3, top 5, whatever it was. So I think Canada seems to be slipping. And then, like he said, the women going from a bronze. I think Canada just has to look, step back, relook at it, and have another go this next Olympics.
And I think that's generally the case for Rugby Canada in general, is they need to take a step back, reevaluate, look at some of the strengths. But one of the great strengths one of the great things that is good coming their way is the launch of Premier Rugby Sevens, where a lot of these players are now going to be adopted in this league. Names are still to be revealed. And in fact, if you want to learn more about that as a fan of Sevens rugby, make sure you stick around and you get us on social media at Rugby Rant Pod. You can find us under that handle on all social media. The reason I bring this up is if you really want to learn more about where Sevens is going in North America in the near future, Premier Rugby Sevens, we will be having Mike Tolkien, who is going to be the GM driving this new league. And it's going to be first event is in Memphis. We're going to have him on the show here on the Rugby Rant Run, Pass, or Kick interview on August 16th. So make sure you tune in for that one. You'll have an opportunity to get some further insight as to where these Olympic athletes will land and how it will work in this professional sevens league, which, by the way, is the first time a professional league is set up in this manner for sevens. We know sevens is a really entertaining format of rugby that has been embraced by fans in the US, and arguably so, is an easier way for them to get involved with rugby. So that's a great chance to be able to learn more about it. August 16th with Mike Tolkien on Run, Pass, or Kick. Scott, I wanted to hand it back to you for some of your final thoughts in regards to the performances of the Olympic athletes in the sevens.
Yeah, we're still cooking. And for those of you that know Mike, he was former Rooney coach in 2019. So, he still has some MLR connections. But yeah, I think, for men's, you have to say if you're going based on final position, it was good for the men's. They were 9th in Rio, 6th or 5th or whatever we said in Tokyo. But we're going on the age thing. I mean, Baker essentially said he's retiring after the Sevens World Cup, so he won't be on the team. I'm assuming Carlin Isles is going to retire from international competition as well. And let's talk about Carlin Isles real quick. He changed his body physique. He looks more like he did in his track and field days, as far as he's a little more bulked up. And I think that helped him, and it showcased his defense, which everybody said he didn't have a defense. I mean, it showed that he has the body to do it, and he has the tackling ability to do it. And honestly, I think he's going to move, into the pro rugby sevens, or maybe even looking for an MLR contract at some point with what he's doing. But Little Hammer mentioned Cody Melfi, and for those of you that didn't follow, this is a big thing that was going on. Cody Melfi on the men's team and Alona Marr on the women's team went viral for their TikToks. And really, you guys might not be in it, but me running the social media for the show, everything was about them. Like, people were, this is the first time I ever watched rugby. I'm watching because of Alona. I'm watching because of Cody. And that's what people are saying, especially young women. And it was amazing to see, regardless of how the women finished and the men finished, that it was a phenomenon to people say, I've never seen rugby before. What the hell is sevens? Then you had people going on and doing some great instructional videos. You had other Olympic teams trying to come in and be on some of these TikToks and stuff. Perry Baker's now on the New Zealand rowing team's TikTok. Like, the cross-pollination between sports on social media and the amount of young people on social media seeing this and picking it up, I think is invaluable. I think USA Rugby, and this was on their personal accounts. This wasn't through USA Rugby. They did it on their own volition, on their own time. And what you get out of that is an organic growth, something that we haven't had in a long time, something that we complain about that USAR doesn't do. We need to continue to ride this wave. We need to continue to have these players go into PR7s and continue to do what they do on social media, because they are the next generation. And like Rob said when he was talking about, or Littlehammer said when he was talking about, who were the kids, and now they're coming up and being the teenagers and the U20s. We still have to go back and get those new set of kids, and this is how we do it. So as far as not meddling, yeah, it's a disappointment, but you know what? Sevens is a fickle mistress. Again, 4-2 is a really good record. But I still think it's a win, just because I'm telling you, we gained so many fans, but we as rugby fans now have to push it on social media ourselves. And I told everybody that I could, well, there's an MLR final coming up. There's Pro Sevens coming around in the United States. So we have to continue that push and get these fans going.
Right. These are the ambassadors that'll carry the sport forward for the next generation. And we need to embrace that. And why wouldn't you? It's free advertising, right? The most powerful tool that you have at your disposal right now is free. So it's definitely worth mentioning. I'm glad you brought that up, Scott. And I wanted to be able to bring it up just for a moment, that, again, why we are here is to be able to help grow rugby one fan at a time. And what personifies that exact same spirit is those two players with Alona and, of course, Cody, who are carrying that flag for USA Rugby on the Sevens circuit. And there are probably even more ambassadors just like them out there, and they too deserve that opportunity to be seen and, of course, to share the game that we all so love, because together we're always going to achieve more. And that's why myself, Rob, and the Hammers, Scott, of course, sorry, I pointed to the wrong person. He's going to hate that. He's like, demerit for Ty. But talking about demerits, we need to be able to now address who's the winner of this round. It's been a little difficult to be able to score this round, but ultimately it comes down to who has provided the greatest points, put forth the best rant. We were a little bit loose on the time frame, so nobody got a yellow card this time around, which is rare. Perhaps the Citing Commission might find more cause for it later.
See, we're letting things play on like JP Doyle did this weekend in the final.
Right. Well,
I'm waiting for Razzie to watch the show and start writing, an hour.
I wanted to bring that up so badly.
Right. I always said, if this whole rugby thing doesn't work out for Rusty Erasmus, he's got a great career in podcasts.
Wrestling, either one.
Right. So are the days of our lives. As rugby fans, there's always going to be a little drama in between, but when the stakes are as high as they are for the British and Irish Lions and South Africa, even more drama perhaps. But let me draw our attention back to the matter at hand, gentlemen. Who is the winner of this episode? And I am going to say the winner is, well, let me phrase it this way. Sometimes two is not better than 1.
Bonus point.
Don't care as long as he doesn't win.
I like that spirit there, Preston. You know what, Preston? As we do all the time, bit of a tradition on the show, when our guest is present, we like to be able to give them the floor for a moment to send a shout out to anybody important. Maybe you have a cause you want to draw attention to. So we hand the mic to you, my friend.
No, I'll thank you guys for having me on for the second time now. It's always a pleasure. But I'll just give a shout out to anybody playing rugby. Hopefully you guys have a blessed season and get through it and get back to playing rugby even through COVID. So good luck to everybody who's watching and any rugby players out there, because we all know we need to get out there and hit someone that we can't usually hit. So
right. So if you are looking
to everybody watching, anytime, big boy, anytime.
Didn't see a step on the field this past weekend.
Mm-hmm. I think I see a TikTok challenge forming right in front of us here somewhere.
Absolutely. We're going to have to do that.
That's if I don't have to teach them how to use it first.
Right. Well, I don't even know. I think who was it? Was it
his younger brother will figure it out. In the meantime, I'll make him scream for mercy.
All right, gentlemen, it's time to be able to leave our final moment here as Scott leaves, the winner of another episode that makes it 2 in a row, I believe, and he'll be looking for the hat trick next week, where you can, of course, find us again on the Rugby Network each and every Friday with a new episode and a new rant and a new debate. What will it be next week? It'll be interesting. Make sure you follow us on the MLR Fan Zone to learn more about Major League Rugby, what's coming for North American rugby as we shift our attention away from MLR to talking about North American rugby, including Premier Rugby Sevens. As I remind you, you can learn more about that through Mike Tolkien's interview here on the Rugby Rant in our Run, Pass, or Kick interview, which will take place on Monday evenings at 8 p.m. CST. My name is Ty Braga. I've been your host for today's activities alongside our competitors here. We have Preston Hammerschmidt, Rob Hammerschmidt, and Scott, the big guy Ferraro. We thank you for watching another great episode of the Rugby Rant, and we will see you at the next.